pleased to be joined today by Ronny Cox, the star of one of my favorite 80s films of all time, Robocop. Mr. Cox, how you doing today, sir?
How you doing?
Very good. First question I had for you. Until 1987, the roles you were performing were such a contrast from the Dick Jones character. What was it that attracted you to the project?
Well, in many ways, Robocop was as big a boon to my career as Deliverance was. Deliverance was my first time in front of a camera. The character I played, Drew, was the sensitive nice guy. And in those days, if you played anyone with any sort of sensitivity, then you could get typecast as sensitivity got equated with weak. So if there was any sort of balls to the character, I often didn't get, and it was frustrating. I'm an athlete. We did all our own stunts, but I was always cast as the nice guy next door or the Mr. Boy Scout nice guy. So I was not what's known in Hollywood as a soft actor. I love the fact that I can play sensitivity, and I reveled in playing those. But it was frustrating to me that I was never offered these other kind of roles. In many ways, I jumped at Robocop because it gave me a chance. Paul Verhoeven's genius in casting me in that was he wanted to trade on that residual goodwill that people, if they had seen me for 12, 15 years playing this nice guy. So he wanted people to have this feeling that when Dick Jones came on, oh, here's a nice guy. And then when Dick Jones wasn't a nice guy, he was twice as evil. And so for a lot of years, Dick Jones was voted the number one villain in films. And I love the fact of that.
That's a great claim to fame.
Yeah. And so I all of a sudden got offered everything.
Yeah.
Because there was a period, I don't mean to brag too much,
No,
but
go ahead.
I was in every movie made there for a while.
Yeah. You mentioned Paul Verhoeven. You went on to create another amazing villain with Cohagen in Total Recall. What was your working relationship with Paul? I'm assuming well, since you did two amazing movies together.
Paul Verhoeven and I got along fabulously well. I'm sure you know he's legendary in his volatility.
Yeah.
In the two films I did with him, I never once problem with Paul because he is so volatile and mercurial. A couple of times, crew guys had come to me and said, Ronny, Paul, he never gets on you. What have you got? Tell you the truth, I don't know. Paul's a very, very intelligent man.
Yeah.
And I think he realized that if he ever went off on me like that, then it would affect my work.
Right.
In a way that was not good. Because some people, he uses that to sort of get what he wants from that person or to get whatever it is he wants. He uses that as a tool. I think he instinctively knew that if he did that to me, that would not further his ends.
Gotcha.
And also another aspect of that, Paul has a PhD in chemistry. My wife was a PhD chemist. Mary got her PhD at Georgetown and did 4-year postdoc at Sloan Kettering in New York. So he and Mary kind of hit it off intellectually well, too.
The film is an extremely dark satire. Did the humor come through on that first script read?
It didn't. When I first read the script and when my agent sent me the script, everybody was laughing about this script. There's this film that's going to be made, Robocop. It was a fairly low-budget film for that time, and we almost lost our funding 3 or 4 times on the film. The reason I jumped at it was because it was a chance for me to play a villain. And I'm not trying to put Ed Neumeyer and those guys down. The script is okay. But what made that film really work was Paul Verhoeven. He's the one that brought that humor. That film is a triumph of Paul Verhoeven's. And he took it from being a sort of laughable piece of comic trash to being this thing. And the humor, the pathos, everything about that really worked and came through is a direct result of Paul Verhoeven.
The movie says so much about American culture, and to have an outsider director come in and to get his perspective on the type of 80s culture we were living through at the time, it definitely gave a fresh perspective for sure. It was interesting.
Yes, it got rated X lots of times. I think the censors at that time hurt the film in a way that they didn't even know. It was rated X for so much blood.
Yeah.
It's in a way, they made it worse for the violence than it really was. Because, see, what Paul wanted to do originally, he grew up in war-torn Europe, and had seen real violence. And Paul wanted the scenes, especially early on, to be so bloody and so over the top that the viewer would say, "Oh, I get it. It's a
Right.
joke."
Right.
If there was just blood rushing down the street, then the viewer would say, "Oh, I get it." The censors kept cutting it back, until they made it right on the edge of what really disturbed us.
Yeah.
And so in many ways made it more disturbing than it would have been.
You were talking about some of the more bloodier scenes. The Ed 209 was one of two scenes the MPAA had major issues with. How much of the filming of Mr. Kenny being obliterated were you there for?
I was there.
That must have been a heck of a shoot, man.
Oh, it was. You've never seen so many squibs putting a guy in your life. And even when they shot Dick Jones out of the window at the end, they put those squibs on you. They're little explosions, is what they are. They not only put squibs on front of me, they put squibs on my back as well. And so when they did that, like I said, I'm an athlete. They put me to my knees, and I had to go and throw up in the bathroom.
Oh, man, really?
Oh, yeah. And that's what happened to me.
Mm-hmm. So I can only imagine. That's crazy. I wanted to back up a little bit. What were your initial thoughts when you first saw the Robocop suit?
I remember the first day we went down because Peter was called in for makeup that first day, and they called him in at, I think, at 6 o'clock in the morning. And at 6 o'clock that night, they finally had him in it. They had not gotten him ready in time to shoot. Eventually, they got it where it could be put together in 2 or 3 hours. But boy, going through that, it was an ordeal. I've had very little contact with Peter because he and I were almost never, except for when he shoots me out the window,
Right.
never in the same scene.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the more iconic pieces of the movie is the Rob Bottin effects.
Rob Bottin is just a genius. He just is a genius. And he became like an icon when he was almost a teenager. So he set up his shop and hired and trained all of the guys he grew up with and went to school with. They were his workers.
Mm-hmm.
What a wonderful, wonderful man he was. It is. He made the lady with the 3 breasts.
Yeah, from Total Recall.
In Total Recall. The number of people that went by to feel that breast.
I guess that speaks to its realism, I guess. You've said in the past that reacting is your favorite part of acting. With that in mind, being paired up with Kurtwood Smith must have been an absolute blast for you.
It was. The fun of acting is reacting. It's the same as playing music. The fun of playing music is playing what you're playing and listen to what the other guy's playing back. That's really what acting is all about, is making that connection. And that's the absolute key to acting for me. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but Kurtwood Smith tested for Dick Jones.
Yeah, I did hear that, yeah. He killed it as this character, but I mean, just to see you two together was fantastic in those scenes.
As Boddicker, he was great.
The power struggle between you and Miguel in the bathroom crescendos with you pulling his hair, which was your idea. Can you talk about your process and your ability to see your characters fully formed versus what's in the script, being able to bring things like that to the table?
Miguel adamantly did not want me to grab his hair. By the way, that was one of the absolute first scenes we shot in the whole. So we had no relationship at that time.
Oh, wow. That's a major power play to do that then on first day of shooting with someone.
Yeah, it was early on. Miguel came to me and said, "Don't pull my hair." He said, "Because I don't know what I'll do." I said, "Look, Miguel," I said, "you're an actor, I'm an actor, and do what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt you, you're not going to hurt me. Whatever that does." Reluctantly, he went along with it. And later he came to me and said, "Thank you for insisting on us doing that." On 3 separate occasions, they were running out of money on Robocop. Mm-hmm. And on 3 separate occasions, the investors came to John Davidson and to Paul Verhoeven and said, "Cut together your best scene because we got to show something to the investors." And they cut together that scene, Miguel and I, 3 separate times to keep the movie going.
That's awesome. I love that. That's great. With a movie that was so clearly doing something that had never been done before, what was the vibe on set? Was it confusion or camaraderie? There was a lot of tension?
We shot in Dallas, as you know, and at that time they were having problems with buildings. So a lot of these buildings we were in were old abandoned buildings that we had to kind of go in and refurbish. And like I said, for a science fiction film, it was pretty low budget. And so there were a lot of tensions.
I'm obviously an outside perspective, and to see a movie that had commercial break-ins, over-the-top violence mixed with humor, and just things that I had not seen before in movies, was there a clear vision out on set?
No, none of us knew the humanity and humor and pathos that Paul was injecting into that.
Yeah.
It had none of that.
Wow.
It was just making a movie.
Robocop was treading new uncharted waters. What was your reactions to the critics' reactions of Robocop when it first came out?
Just for me personally, being a bad guy was all of a sudden people were looking at me through a completely different lens. And I have to say it was kind of thrilling.
Have you ever seen Robocop with an audience before?
We saw it at the screening, but I don't often go see my films just because I never see that guy up there on the screen as an extension of me. It's almost like watching another person. And I say, well, that works and that didn't work. And I'm not one of these people that I don't feel either joyous pride of watching myself or embarrassment of watching myself.
Ronny, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your insights and your behind-the-scenes stories. I wish you best success with your movies and your music career, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, have a great day. Bye.